Veronica, San Francisco is still the most expensive city in the country to rent an apartment. We're in the Pacific Heights neighborhood in the city, but new numbers show that there's been an exodus of residents who now have better options. Pay the expensive rent or move out.
People are leaving, kind of just ditching their apartments and leaving kind of their roommates hanging, or they're trying their best to find someone to sublease their rooms, or they're just leaving San Francisco altogether and moving back home.
Anthony Natoli decided to move back to New Jersey after paying more than $4,000 a month for his apartment in Cow Hollow, working in tech sales.
All of the normal things that we see as driving demand for rental housing in San Francisco have pretty much dried up.
In June, rent prices year over year dropping more than 9% in San Francisco. Mountain View more than 15%. Cupertino down 14%.
We're getting a lot of people moving to Southern California, moving out to the Central Valley, moving up to, around the Sacramento area, Tahoe, Sonoma County, a lot of different places. So it's definitely been a trend that's been going on.
Landlords want a commitment that they're not going to have a vacancy at this time when we're looking at such, incredible supply, lots of units opening up and no demand to fill it.
A new survey from the San Francisco Apartment Association shows more than 7% of renters simply broke their leases over the last 3 months. But there's a way to get free money if you approach it correctly.
You'll get farther by recognizing that landlords want that base rent to be kept, basically where it's at.
Some 2.7 million adults in the country moved in with their parents in March and April. That's a trend that could lead to more than $700 million in lost rent for landlords this year.
Ask for a free month's rent, sign a new one-year lease, and the effective rent goes down for 13 months, essentially.
And one important thing to note is that these leases are legally binding contracts, so if it is broken, the landlords can go after the tenants financially. As for the most affordable places to live in the Bay Area, according to Zillow, those cities in the Bay Area are now Vallejo and Concord, with rents going from about $1,450 to $1,750 for a one-bedroom apartment. We're live in San Francisco. Kenny Choi,
Kenny, what's the best advice here?
To eat McDonald's after.
Sorry about that, Kenny.
Go to
what's
Walmart,
the best advice on
yeah.
what not to
okay,
do
Mom.
then?
In case I something happens and I forget, because it could happen. But
well, we talked to apartment
okay?
managers today, and they said that they
Mom.
heard from some tenants asking for a rent decrease of 20% to 30%. That's a non-starter because the rents haven't decreased by that amount. They say ask for something reasonable, a couple months of rent for free in exchange for a commitment of an extra year-long extension to that lease. Veronica?
I'm going to be taking care of the smoky.
All right, Kenny Choi, we appreciate it. Thank you.
I'm just gonna get some money from the monkey.
You are the example of racism in this community. You are horrible. I had intended to get up here and talk about how racist Robert E. Lee was, but I'm gonna talk about you, Cotton. Sitting over there shopping while we talking about Robert E. Lee. This is a picture of you shopping while we talking about racism and history in this country. Only white members of this board got up while we were up here talking too, because you don't give a damn.
Friday lunchtime in the centre of Glasgow. This was a chaotic, harrowing scene. Armed police officers rushed to the Park Inn. Inside the hotel, they shot a man dead, but not before a number of people had been stabbed. Witnesses heard at least one shot fired and spoke of a blood-strewn scene.
When I went down, about to take the lift, inside the lift was covered with blood. So I did not take the lift and I went down to the stairs. When I went down to the stairs, that's where I saw the whole reception area was covered with blood. So what happened was I saw that one of the reception got stabbed and he was lying behind the desk of the reception, behind the receptionist's desk. He was lying and he was gasping for air.
Okay, so it might take a while to load, but...
well, I hate to say I told you so, but I did previously say that mandatory vaccines would be introduced by initially tying them to international travel. This is something I've said a few times, and in detail in my video, The Rationalization of Tyranny. Now, there will be a backlash to mandatory vaccination for COVID-19, and to some degree that backlash may even be partially successful within a person's country. But if they choose to go abroad, vaccinations could easily be made a requirement. Furthermore, I've talked about things like digital immunity IDs, and I've mentioned this article from Scientific American about invisible ink technology that could contain vaccine records under a child's skin. Anyway, when it comes to the idea of mandatory vaccines for travel, it turns out I may have been onto something. This article, published 4 days ago, is from the BBC. Will travel be...
I don't know why, but it's taking forever.
Alexander Solzhenitsyn said that to destroy a people, you must first sever their roots. And I think this is what we've observed in Western countries over the past few decades. In universities, we've seen left-wing activists masquerading as academics, polluting the minds of young people with notions about how their nation's history was filled with systemic racism and sexism. They've sought to promote the idea that white people should have a collective shame or guilt for the past sins of their ancestors. Globalism and multiculturalism have sought to marginalize the identities and cultures of European peoples. By making all Western cities as diverse and multicultural as possible, they've effectively become all the same. There's no single defining and unique identity anymore. The people make the place after all, but when a city like London, for example, becomes only 45% indigenous English, it's not surprising that it no longer feels or resembles an English city. The heart and identity of a place is irrevocably changed by internationalism, reducing a city or nation to being a province of a global order. We've recently witnessed the tearing down of statues in London and in America. The removal of monuments to a people's past disconnects them from their heritage. The vilifying of their historical figures further deracinates the people and dislocates them from a sense of belonging to their homeland. Just like an ethnic group's shared history, a people's culture is the story they tell themselves about themselves. So to rewrite it, to undermine it, devalue it, and outright expunge a culture and history is to make the people malleable and modifiable, to rob them of their values. This demoralization process makes it easier to bring about social and political and cultural change, i.e. revolution. This has always been a tactic of communist revolutionaries. It's important to say that I'm not even certain that our own political leaders are fully aware of how this process works or what it is that they're actually enabling. Western politicians are little more than puppets of global oligarchs, and they merely enforce their policies at a local national level. This article is from CityAM.com. Sadiq Khan orders review of London's statues and street names. The first thing that came into my mind there was Constantinople. London Mayor Sadiq Khan has ordered a review of the capital's statues and street names after the toppling of the statue of an English slave trader by anti-racism protesters triggered a debate about the demons of Britain's imperial past. A statue of Edward Colston, who made a fortune in the 17th century from trading West African slaves, was torn down and thrown into Bristol Harbour on Saturday by a group of demonstrators taking part in a wave of protests following the death of George Floyd in the United States. All nations and all peoples have aspects of their history that they're not proud of, but this is an over-focusing on only negative aspects of Western people's past. History is history, and denying it is to deny reality. If the British people wish to have an open dialogue about what their street names should be and which statues they would like to keep, well, that's fine. Let them have that discourse. But it's clear these changes are being brought about because of the intimidation of an angry, violent, baying mob. Why would anyone acquiesce to that? Khan said a commission would review statues, plaques and street names which largely reflect the rapid expansion of London's wealth and power at the height of Britain's empire in the reign of Queen Victoria. Our capital's diversity is our greatest strength. Oh, come on! Again with the diversity is our strength thing? Diversity destroys homogeneity, weakens social trust, and creates fragmentation, ethnic enclaves, and segregation. It's the exact opposite of strength. He says, yet our statues, road names, and public spaces reflect a bygone era, Kant said. A bygone era, it's the past. It's history, and it's fact. He said some statues would be removed. So these statues reflect the past, which is to say reality, and it is the past of the British people. It is therefore theirs. It belongs to them. If people don't like that history, they should perhaps go and live somewhere else.
it's
So
summer in
let's talk about the
Minnesota right
Trojan
now, so
horse element of totalitarianism. Now, as you
so
know, I've
sunny
previously
and I
spoken about
can
the Sustainable Development
barely
Goals of the
even
UN,
see.
Agenda 2030, as part of Agenda
I'm gonna
21.
stop
And it's all very
right
utopian.
now
But
because,
what have we witnessed this year?
yeah,
Well, the rule of law has broken down.
Okay, guys, so I
Police
just
now
stopped
take their
posting
orders
now.
from governments and not the constitutions
don't
written to
want
protect
to
the
vote it
people.
or anything.
That's the definition of a
So,
police
guys, I think
state.
I'm gonna
All
end
of this
it here.
wonderful, shiny, happy, peace on earth talk, all of this prosperity we're
Bye,
supposed to be having,
guys.
this is the kind of rhetoric